It was a quiet afternoon when I decided to visit the swimming pool. The city felt unbearably heavy that day, full of noise, faces, and thoughts I didn't want to face. The water, I thought, might silence everything for a while. My life had become predictable: wake up, work, return home to a marriage that felt more like a habit than love. We spoke less, smiled even less. It wasn't anger between us, just distance, like two people living parallel lives under the same roof. I didn't go to the pool looking for anything, only peace. The air around the pool was warm and smelled faintly of chlorine. I slipped into the water, feeling it cool against my skin, and for a few moments, everything was calm. Then, across the pool, I noticed him, a tall African man, his skin glistening under the afternoon light. He moved through the water with an ease that caught my attention. There was confidence in him, not arrogance but something quietly grounded. Our eyes met briefly before I looked away, pretending to focus on swimming. Yet, something about that first glance stayed with me. After a while, we found ourselves near the same corner of the pool. He smiled, the kind of warm smile that melts away awkwardness, and said, "You swim well." I laughed a little, surprised by his friendly tone. "Not really," I said. "Just trying to remember how." We both laughed, and the tension vanished instantly. He introduced himself: Daniel, visiting from another country for a few months, working nearby. There was something sincere about the way he spoke, as if he meant every word, as if conversation with a stranger still mattered. That we started talking, slowly at first, about simple things. The weather. The pool. The city. I told him how quiet it felt to swim. He said he liked how water made people forget who they were for a moment. That line stayed with me. Maybe he was right. In the water, we were just two people floating, without titles, without burdens. As time passed, I noticed how natural it felt to talk to him. He laughed easily, listened carefully, and had a calmness that pulled me in. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen. We shared a few light jokes, splashing water at each other like children, and I caught myself smiling without effort. It was strange how comfortable it felt, like we had known each other far longer than the few minutes we'd spoken. The sun began to dip, casting golden reflections on the water's surface. Daniel swam to the edge and leaned against it, looking at me. "You come here often?" he asked. "Not really," I said, "but maybe I should." He chuckled softly and said, "Then I might see you again." His words sounded casual, but something in the tone felt different, gentle, almost inviting. When I left the pool that evening, I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but there was something there, something that filled a quiet part of me I didn't even know was empty. On the way home, I caught myself smiling again. It felt strange, almost guilty, but honest. For years, I had forgotten what it was like to feel connected, even in the smallest ways. That night, lying in bed beside my wife, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts kept drifting back to the pool, to Daniel's laughter, to the way his eyes seemed to hold no judgment. I told myself it was nothing, just a friendly encounter. But deep down, I knew it had stirred something. A feeling I hadn't felt in years: warmth, curiosity, and a quiet sense of peace. I closed my eyes and tried to push it away, but the image of calm blue water and a stranger's smile stayed with me, lingering softly like a memory that didn't want to fade. The next afternoon, I found myself walking back toward the swimming pool without even deciding to. It felt like my body moved before my thoughts could catch up. I told myself I just wanted to swim again, to clear my mind, but a part of me already knew that wasn't the truth. I wanted to see him. I wanted to feel that quiet ease again, the kind that had slipped into my heart without warning. When I reached the pool, Daniel was already there, sitting on the edge with his feet in the water. He looked up, smiled when he saw me, and waved as if he had been waiting. I tried to play it casual, greeting him with the same smile, but something inside me fluttered. We talked again, and this time, it wasn't small talk. He asked me how my day had been, if I slept well, if life at home was peaceful. The question caught me off guard. I hesitated before answering, "It's fine." He looked at me for a moment, as though he saw through the word. Then he nodded slowly, saying, "Sometimes, fine just means tired." We slipped into the water together. The sound of the pool, the laughter of children, the soft splashes around us, all faded into the background. He told me about his life back home, about growing up near the ocean, where the waves were stronger than here. There was something soothing about the way he spoke, as if every word came from a calm, deep place. I found myself opening up too, speaking of things I rarely said out loud. I told him I felt distant from everything lately, from my work, from my wife, from myself. He didn't interrupt or offer solutions. He just listened, and somehow, that was enough. After swimming, we sat by the poolside, water dripping down our arms. The evening sun stretched long shadows across the floor. Daniel looked thoughtful and said quietly, "It's strange how you can live with someone and still feel alone." His voice was gentle, not judging, just real. The words hit me harder than I expected. I didn't reply, I just looked down at the water, its surface trembling with small ripples. Over the next few days, we kept meeting. Sometimes by chance, sometimes because one of us hinted we would be there. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. He told me stories that made me laugh, stories that made me think. With him, there was no need to pretend, no fear of being misunderstood. One evening, we sat silently, watching the sunset reflect on the pool's surface, and he said, "When you stop fighting what you feel, life becomes lighter." Those words lingered in my head long after I went home. I began to notice how different I felt when I was around him. It wasn't only about attraction, it was something deeper, something that gave me a strange sense of peace. At home, though, things felt heavier. My wife noticed I was quieter, lost in thought, but she didn't ask. Maybe she already knew something had changed. That night, Daniel sent me a message, "You look distant today. Are you okay?" I stared at the screen for a long time before replying, just thinking too much. He responded, "Don't be afraid of your thoughts. They're only trying to show you who you really are." I didn't know what to say back. His words felt both comforting and terrifying. That I lay awake that night, thinking about him, about what all of this meant. Was it wrong to feel this connection? Was I betraying someone, or just finally being honest with myself? I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that when I thought of him, the world felt quieter, easier, softer. I hadn't felt that kind of peace in years. The next time we met, I told him that being around him made me feel seen in a way I didn't understand. He smiled, then reached out and placed his hand gently on my shoulder. "You don't need to understand it," he said softly. "Just don't be ashamed of it." His hand stayed there for a moment, and in that silence, something inside me shifted, a calm acceptance, mixed with fear. I didn't know what this connection would lead to, but I knew it had already changed something deep within me.
Days turned into weeks, and I tried to stay away, but his presence lingered in every quiet thought. I would pass by his street on my way to class, pretending it was coincidence, though I knew it wasn't. Every time my phone buzzed, I half expected his name to appear. When it finally did, it was just one line, "Are you all right?" I stared at it for minutes before replying, "I don't know." He invited me over again, but this time the house felt different. The warmth that once waited inside was replaced by something heavier, almost cautious. We sat in the same room, yet the distance between us was clearer now. He looked tired, like someone carrying too many unspoken regrets. "I shouldn't have let things go that far," he said quietly. "You deserve a life untouched by my mistakes." I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to tell him it wasn't a mistake, that what we shared wasn't just confusion, but the words stayed trapped behind my tongue. He spoke about his family, about his wife beginning to notice the way he drifted through their days. He said his son and my friend had asked why he seemed so distracted lately. Hearing that made something inside me twist. I realized then how easily a moment of truth could turn into a lifetime of guilt. I lowered my eyes, unable to meet his. The silence between us stretched like a wound. After a long pause, he reached across the table, not to touch me this time, but to place a photograph there. It was of his family, the three of them smiling, unaware of the cracks beneath. "This is my life," he said softly. "And you reminded me what it felt like to feel again. But I can't keep losing pieces of myself to what can't last." His voice trembled slightly, and I felt something break inside me. I stood, pacing toward the window where sunlight spilled weakly through the curtains. Outside, children were laughing in the street. Everything looked painfully ordinary. I didn't mean to make things hard for you, I said, the words barely leaving my throat. You didn't, he replied, standing behind me. You just made me remember. We stood there in silence for a while, the air thick with everything we couldn't say. When I finally turned, there was nothing left to explain. His eyes told me he had already decided to end it, to bury this connection somewhere it couldn't destroy what he still had. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel his breath, then stopped himself. Take care of yourself, he whispered, and then he smiled, a real, sad smile that carried both affection and farewell. I left without looking back. The door closed softly behind me, but the sound echoed louder than any goodbye. On the walk home, the streets blurred through the sting in my eyes. I wanted to hate him for ending it, but I couldn't. What we had wasn't built to last. It was a moment of truth in a world full of lies, a brief spark between two people who shouldn't have met that way. That night, I sat in my room, the quiet pressing against my chest. I thought about his words, about how some connections aren't meant to survive, only to teach. Maybe that's what this was, a lesson in the kind of love that asks for silence instead of promises. Weeks later, life went back to normal. My friend never knew, and his father never called again. But sometimes, when I pass by that house, I still feel the echo of that room, the soft light, the quiet voices, the unspoken truth hanging in the air. Some loves don't belong to the world, they belong only to memory. And though it ended, I know a part of me will always remember the man who taught me that even forbidden feelings can still be real.